Visualis3R is able to show you different types of coatings and varnish. For example, on a digital device like the Ricoh Pro Series, the Xerox Series S, Fuji Film, Revoria, the Sharp BP1200S, they all have a clear toner. And that has a very certain type of optical property and reflection. Then you have varnish. A varnish is typically something that you might be used like on an offset press. It could be on a UV offset press, and that has a higher gloss rate. It's still flat, but it's got more reflectivity to it. And then you also have things like Duplo and Scodex, which are 3D raised polymer or varnish-based systems that create a domed type of effect. And we can see all of that on the screen. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple of business cards. So in my business card files, I've got like a varnish layer, a clear layer, it might have a white in there. There's actually 2 pages, but first of all, what we're going to do is, as we teach on a lot of these tutorial videos, it's all about showing you how to use the tool effectively. So for example, a business card is really small. So when you basically rip that to a TIFF, which is what the visualization software needs to render, you no longer have vector graphics. So you're going to get some kind of like pixelation, as you can see here on the edge. It doesn't look like much at the moment because what we're going to do is print this actually or visualize it onto a black paper. So first of all, we have the ability to increase the resolution. So if you have fine line details, if you have text, business cards, things like that are small, so when it scales up, we can increase the resolution so it's smoother and looks better on the screen. Okay, so let's jump into this. We've got 2 pages. We're looking at page number 1 first of all. So let's go down to the substrate controls and we're going to change this to, let's go to an uncoated paper. And now let's change the color as well. So you'll notice that we have an ink absorption slider and also gloss level. So it can change the reflectivity or the gloss level of the paper itself and calculate or simulate the ink absorption. So when you print onto an uncoated stock, you don't get that complete bright clean saturation, so we can simulate that in here. We're not going to use that today. Do look at our other video tutorials on how to work with all of these different substrates. For now, we're just going to go into the color picker and we're going to basically put it in a color. So what you could do is you could use a device like maybe the NYX color sensor, the NYX Mini 3. They're about $100 for these little color measurement devices. You can take your paper substrate, you can measure it, and it will give you a color value, which will give you a hex value. So you could go in here and paste your hex value into it. For now, all we're going to do is just visualize a black on there. Now we do have 2 varnishes on there at the moment, a varnish and a clear. So let's just turn those off and we'll come back to that in a moment. Anything with a warning sign means that you need to configure the layers. So at the moment we have a foil, which is the Visualis3R text, and it doesn't know what foil you want to use because in my spot color I just called it foil. So it gives you the ability to go in here and pick some different ones out. So for example, maybe I want to use a bronze. So I'm going to use a bronze on there, and obviously there's lots of different ones from rainbows, some purples, pinks, green, blue, etc. You can also put in a custom colored foil. So if you have a foil library of samples, maybe you've been working with someone like Foilco, they're one of the leading brands in hot foil stamping, etc. They have about 150 different colored foils. So you can visually go in and match it. So maybe it's like a purplish color, maybe it's a little bit more saturated, maybe the reflection's a little bit less, maybe the metalness is less. And again, do look at our other video tutorials on what all these things mean. Does it have some texture in there or not? So you can go in here and play around with all the different settings and set up your preferred way of working. We also have the option to switch on hot foil stamping. So if you are doing a hot foil stamping, as we will be doing in this case, we switch that on and it gives you a little kind of like edge to your foil, which is what you get when you emboss or basically hot print the foil into the substrate. It doesn't go completely flat. You'll know this by basically rubbing your finger over it. It's got that lovely kind of feeling to it. It's a tactile kind of feel. You can feel the edge where it's been embossed almost into the paper a little bit. So that's what the simulation does. So let's just take a quick look at that. We can see the Visualis3R logo as a foil. We've done bronze and we've set that up with a hot foil stamping on the side of there. Now we do have other things, and I'm just going to tease you in here, but do look at our other video tutorials. We could also add textures in here. So we've added in some different types of textures. We will eventually be adding in leading brand names of different types of effects. A classic one, for example, will be Stardust. Stardust gives it, if we can just zoom in, it's kind of like Let me just turn off that foil stamping so you can probably see it a little bit better on the screen. It's that kind of like really micro dotted, tiny little textured, like stardust. Do pay attention to all of these different tutorials. As mentioned, we will always go above and beyond. We don't just say, hey, this is varnish. We want to show you and teach you and educate you about design. So this is a typical kind of business card. Uncoated stock, it's black. You've got a foil stamping on there, it's hot foil stamping, and we also have a white ink in case you didn't realize. So there we go. There's the spot white. So if you're printing on an uncoated stock, you want a spot white ink. So we can simulate that. Now maybe the white that's on your press isn't quite as opaque. Some of the digital devices, the whites, it's nice, but when you print onto an uncoated stock, they'll probably tell you want to print 1 hit, 2 hits, or 3 hits of the white. So we can simulate different types of opacity. So maybe your ink's more like this. So as a single pass, white on the paper, you can match it to it. So do contact your print service providers or whoever's doing your printing, or the substrate companies or the ink suppliers, to get samples of their materials so that you can then visualize that in the Visualis3R software. So if you get a piece of black printed material with white ink on it, you can then decide, okay, so to match the sample printed this way, it's at 90%, and then you can save that as a preset. You can also save it as a default, so do again check out our other video tutorials that explains the difference between saving as a default and saving presets. Basically a preset is a library, defaults will make sure that it sets that every time you use that spot white. So let's just say it's 100% in this case. Okay, so what do we need to do? Let's take a look at this first of all with a clear. Well, a clear has a certain gloss level to it. So again, contact your print service provider. Now you'll notice here at the moment my varnish is above the top. Now we don't want that. I want my actual foil to be on the top layer. I don't want it to be I want the foil on top of the varnished area. So you can stack your layers and move them around, and by doing so it'll recalculate the effect. Now that clear, as I was mentioning, contact your print service provider. So if you've got a Ricoh Pro C7500, ask for a sample of their clear toner on black and see what you get. So then what you can do now is, we've pre-configured some effects in here, but if you then look at it and say, okay, well, it's not quite that shiny, Richard, it's more like that. We can control reflectivity and everything else, and we can also put in a little bit of texture. So we have the ability, and you can see here by doing so, adding texture diffuses the light. So it's really important that when you're visualizing files, get a sample of the material. And this is why you can't have one set piece of software that says, this is clear, this is varnish, because it's different on every substrate from every supplier on every press. So you must have the controls, and that's the thing about this Visualis3R software. It empowers you, it gives you full control of matching any foil color, any metallic color, different types of textures and effects, whether you want to do clears or varnishes or Duplo and Scodex, it can do absolutely everything. And if we have missed something, which we have a few other things coming out later on, such as cast and cure, but we will try our best to add a feature if you need it. So if you want something adding, let us know, and if we can code it, we will add it. Okay, so we've simulated a clear on there. So now we have a clear on our business card with a bronze foil hot stamped with a white ink. So that's just one way of being able to work with this. Now we could say, okay, well, we're not doing this on a digital press, we're doing it on an offset, and we're going to do a varnish down first. So what we're going to do in this case, we're going to do a varnish. Now varnish has a much higher reflectivity, but it's still the same. It's all about reflectivity of light. So we can whack this right up, we can turn it right down, and let's get it on the right layer, Richard, it would help. We can whack this right up, we can turn it right down, we can simulate all those different effects. Now let me just whack that right up and let's put some texture in there so you can see how that works. So if you've got one of those textured varnishes, we can simulate that as well, no problem. We can also change that into a sculptured varnish if we want. So for example, let me just go back and reset that. So if you do mess around, you're playing around and you're like, oops, what did I do? You can always reset to default. It'll go back to the pre-saved defaults in there. So let's take a look at sculptured. So sculptured basically will allow you to then add varnish depth. So we can now add a 3D sculptured varnish. I personally wouldn't do it on this design. This design itself doesn't lend itself to sculptured. It would be on a flat and maybe the varnish levels like that. Or like I said, more than likely for what I would do in this one, I would probably be doing clears and things like that. But it really depends on what you want to do. So anyway, play around with it, see what you think. So next what we're going to do, page 2. This is a slightly different business card. Now, because this has been ripped at the same time, it's still on an uncoated stock with a black thing, so I could just go back down here and reset to defaults. That will reset the paper back to white. So in this case, I've actually got a dark design that I've added to this file, as you can see. So I've got my my gloss level, so I can play with my gloss features on my layers. I can play with satin, uncoated, matte, or whatever. So again, set all this up the way that your materials work. So we'll just pretend that we're going to do this with a, let's go with, what foil do we want this time? Let's go gold. No, actually, let's go with like a rainbow. So on the rainbow, we can just play around with this a little bit, maybe put some complexity in there, let's change the coverage variation. Let's give that some hot foil stamping as well. In fact, actually, this might be actually done in line on a rainbow holographic board. So let's pretend that's what we're doing on this one. Okay, so we've now got that on there. We now also have a gold. So let's just switch off the Duplo layer for now. We'll come back to this. So we have this gold element here. So this is a gold toner on the press. So maybe what you've done is you've got a rainbow holographic board, you've output it with this blackish grey gradient over it, maybe you put a spot white on there as well. This was actually done in the artwork file, and maybe you then done a secondary pass with the gold, or maybe you've done it all in line if you've got the right kind of machine where you can do 5 or 6 colours. But what colour is gold? Well, gold can be any type of shade. So we've pre-built in one standard type of gold, but you can go in here and mix and match it to whatever kind of shade you like. So you can also change the texture strength and metalness, the roughness and reflections of all that. The limitations on metallics is not as wide because metallics have got a certain bandwidth of reflectivity, so we've capped the controls, but we can also add on some flake size. So what I've done here, if we can just zoom in, you can see now we have added that sparkle. So metallic inks aren't flat. Every time I see rendering engines that are trying to do metallics, they're very, very flat, and it's basically almost like adding just like a highlight edge to it. Now that's not the way it works with metallic. Metallics have sparkle, and you can control the amount of that sparkle by changing the intensity. So if you were to look at, say for example, a digital gold printed off the Ricoh, the Sharp, the Fujifilm, or the Xerox devices, they all have this very subtle kind of gold flake to them, and that's because metallic inks have particles in them. It's the particles that creates the reflectivity, and therefore we are adding that into our design. Now let's just go a little bit over the top. Let's just whack that up a little bit more. Let's say we've got a really coarse pigmented one. Well, we can simulate that. Beautiful. So now we've got rainbow holographic, we've got that metallic gold. Now, as you've noticed here, if I just change I'll just reset my view to front and center. Maybe I want to do an image capture. Well, what we can also do is use our environmental controls. We can move the lighting around left and right, top and bottom, to find the little sweet spot. So maybe I decide that, okay, there looks about right. Let's move it down a little bit. I've got this beautiful reflected gold particles now. My rainbow holographic's looking cool. I'm happy with that. So maybe that's my gold. So now when we do an image capture, we're actually taking advantage of the environmental controls to set up the image. So instead of having to move your file to capture it, you can basically just move the lighting to do it. So it's a secondary lighting. It's not the room, it's an actual spotlight. Okay, so final bit, Duplo. So Duplo is basically a 3D raised varnish, and it can be sculptured really high. You know, you can feel it. It's like Braille. If you were to rub your finger over it, it's got a real bump to it. So it can simulate that. Now we've added in a nice gloss level there, and again you have the controls to be able to change all that. So you can change the bevel, you can change the varnish depth. You know, you can see here how it's changing in real time. Highlight edge, you know, how much reflectivity is coming off it, because certain angles you might have more. You can reduce the varnishing level. So again, you can set this up however you want. You know, maybe it's got a little bit of texture in there. And then again, save it as your preferred setting. So all you do is go in here and say save as default, and every time you use a Duplo separation, it will be set to your settings that you like to use, that matches the samples that you actually have printed and produced. So there we have a very quick demonstration, although it took a little bit longer than I expected, on how to work with different types of varnishing. So just to recap, you've got clear toners, you've got varnishes, you've got things like sculptured varnish like Duplo and Scodex. Now we have built-in naming nomenclature for all the major effects. So for example, if you like to call yours varnish, it will pick up varnish. If you like to call it clear, it'll pick up clear naming. If you want to put in spot UV or gloss coating, there's all of these different naming nomenclatures built into the software, which means that you can put just about any type of varnish in there. However, we do always recommend that you use the Visualis3R spot palette, which has all of our different spot colors pre-built in there for you to make it nice and easy. So there we go, Visualis3R for coatings and varnishes.